What would you do if your own sister exposed your secret fortune, then demanded a share of it in front of 50 guests? Would you stay silent, or would you show everyone exactly who she really is? On the night I turned 35, I learned that family love can disappear the second money appears. Seattle's September twilight glowed like copper as I stepped into the Fairmont Olympic Hotel's private dining room. Golden chandeliers scattered warm light over long tables dressed in cream linen and fragrant garden roses. I had spent months planning this birthday celebration. Careful budgeting, handwritten invitations, a menu that nodded to Grandma Grace's recipes, her signature lemon thyme chicken and blackberry tarts. To my guests' colleagues from the ICU, a handful of college friends, it was simply a stylish nurses' party. None of them knew that my real secret wasn't the food or the venue, but the $8 million portfolio quietly growing in my Vanguard account. I'd just welcomed Dr. Martinez, my supervisor and dear friend, when the first crack of drama arrived, the sharp staccato of designer heels on marble. Rachel, my younger sister by 3 years, swept in 40 minutes late and perfectly choreographed. Her camel-colored coat swirled like it was on a runway. A brand-new Hermes bag swung from her arm. "Sorry, Diana," she said loudly, ensuring every head turned. "Client emergency. You know how it is when you're running $1 million company." She paused theatrically. "Oh wait, you wouldn't." My mother, Patricia, nearly skipped to embrace her. "Rachel, darling, tell everyone about your new contract." There it was, the dance I'd known all my life. Rachel, the dazzling entrepreneur. Mom, the tireless promoter. And me, the quiet nurse, positioned as contrast. Rachel smiled like a politician and pulled an iPad from her bag. 3 Fortune 500 clients this quarter alone, she declared. "Actually, I brought my slides. Some potential investors are here tonight." I caught sight of Mr. Chen, a prominent venture capitalist, seated in the corner with a colleague of mine. Rachel had obviously noticed him too. "Rachel," I said gently, "it's my birthday dinner." "Oh, don't be selfish," Mom cut in. "Your sister's success is the family's success." The air tightened. My ICU colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. Dr. Martinez tilted her head as if to ask, "Are you okay with this?" I simply smiled and moved toward another table, letting Rachel plug her iPad into the big screen. Within minutes, my birthday party had been rebranded as a business pitch. Sullivan Marketing Solutions, where success meets strategy, flashed across the wall. As Rachel strutted through market share charts, Mom provided color commentary. "Unlike some people who are content with simpler careers," she said, eyes landing on me, "Rachel built her company from nothing. Of course there's nothing wrong with being a nurse. Someone has to do it." The room's warmth cooled. Friends who'd watched me lead life or death ICU shifts looked ready to object, but I placed a calming hand on Dr. Martinez's arm. I'd lived with these little cuts for years. Tonight, I simply took a slow breath and let them speak. While Rachel boasted of projections, next quarter we're doubling revenue, I felt an old memory stir. Grandma Grace's voice, low and steady. "Patience, my dear Diana. Let people show their true colors. The universe keeps perfect records." Grace had been a retired teacher with thrift store clothes and a secret passion for investing. She'd taught me to balance a checkbook before I was 10, and to read stock tables long before I finished nursing school. What Rachel and Mom didn't know was that, during countless night shifts, I'd completed an online MBA and spent a decade meeting quarterly with Marcus, my financial advisor. They still thought of me as the stable but unambitious daughter. A subtle vibration in my purse pulled me back. My phone screen glowed. Vanguard monthly portfolio summary available. I quickly silenced it, heart quickening. 10 years of quiet planning, and still no one suspected. From the podium, Rachel's laughter rang out. "Diana, don't you think it's time you moved to something more affordable? Maybe one of my rentals in Renton. I could even give you a family discount, say, $800 a month." Polite smiles faltered around the room. My friends knew I lived in a bright Capitol Hill apartment with a view of the Space Needle, not the struggling picture Rachel painted. Mom clasped her hands in theatrical gratitude. "Diana, you should be thankful. Not everyone has a successful sister willing to help." I thanked them calmly, even as a quiet ache bloomed under my ribs. They didn't ask how I really lived or what I had built. They never had. I thought again of Grandma Grace's last months, when I sat beside her bed, listening to her slow, deliberate wisdom. Money is a mirror, Diana. It shows people to themselves. Wait, and you'll see. Tonight, that prophecy felt closer than ever. And somewhere deep inside, I sensed that the night was only beginning. Rachel had the room orbiting her in minutes, as if my birthday were just convenient gravity. She clicked to a slide with upward arrows and glossy brand logos that glittered like constellations. This quarter alone, she announced, we secured $1.2 million in partnerships. Next quarter, we double. Mom supplied the chorus. That's what vision looks like, she said brightly. Of course, there's value in stability too. Her eyes slid to me with a familiar softness that wasn't soft at all. Diana's always been our steady one. Steady, it landed like a paper cut. Small, but right on the knuckle where you keep bending. Dr. Martinez edged closer. You okay? She murmured without moving her lips. I'm fine, I whispered back, then added, promise. I've learned that in a crisis, the ICU or a birthday calm buys you clarity. Rachel strutted, the iPad a gleaming baton. She spotlighted a strategic case study, a campaign that turned a failing launch into a trending headline. Guests oohed politely. Mom clasped her pearls as if they were applause meters. I watched the faces in the room. My night shift nurses with quiet iron in their spines. My college friend Jennifer, who has never learned to hide disgust. Mr. Chen in the corner, not nodding, measuring. Diana, Mom called brightly across the table. Since you're still living in that tiny apartment, maybe Rachel can help you find something more achievable? A few of my colleagues stared at the ceiling, the tablecloth, their toes anywhere but my face. They'd been to my place. They'd watched fireworks reflected in my window, the Space Needle spiking the sky. But you don't argue with a myth someone loves about you. It never ends. I smiled. I'm good, Mom. Be practical, Rachel coaxed. A hand to her heart like benevolence was hard labor. I could move you into Renton, family rate, 800. Jennifer muttered. She thinks Seattle landlords are fairy godmothers. Mom leaned in. And you really should consider learning from your sister. She offered to involve you at her company, didn't you, Rachel? Rachel lit up. Absolutely. We could do an unpaid internship situation so she gets exposure, you know? Real business experience. Unpaid, Jennifer repeated, tasting the word like it had gone sour. Think of it as tuition, Rachel said, pleased with her metaphor. You observe, you type, you absorb. Data entry's a respectful way to start. I pictured my last 18-hour shift, a man's chest under my palms, the steadied rhythm of compressions, the code team syncing like a single living animal. I thought of the grant I'd written at 3 a.m. that brought new bedside ultrasound units to our ICU, of the cost-saving workflow we'd implemented that trimmed millions from waste without cutting patient care. Data entry would be a relief. Honestly, it would ask nothing of my soul. But the mismatch of their narrative and my life made me feel momentarily dizzy, like stepping off a curb you didn't know was there. Diana? Mom asked, so sweetly. Say thank you. Thank you, I said, and meant it in the smallest, truest way. Thank you for showing me exactly where we stand. A waiter refilled my water. It trembled in the glass, the surface shivering with a ghost of the chandelier. I stared into it and heard Grandma Grace's voice again, octave low and certain. Let them talk. It will tell you everything you need to know. What they didn't know. 3 years ago, while they were congratulating Rachel for a press mention, I was writing a literature review on ICU mortality reduction between night rounds. While Mom raved about a gala, I was submitting the last paper of my online MBA. While Rachel posted a boomerang of champagne at a rooftop with the caption, "Building," I was on a call with Marcus, running tax loss harvest scenarios and rebalancing toward a mid-cap index I liked for boring, beautiful reasons. None of it was a secret out of spite. It was a secret because quiet is how things grow. Rachel flipped to a slide about visionary leadership, and I slipped into memory another bright room but a smaller one, Grandma's kitchen. Mismatched mugs, crossword puzzles, a window that looked onto a plum tree that refused to die. She'd pull out a yellow legal pad and sketch little ladders, habits as rungs. You climb these, you reach something. She'd underline, read boring documents, ask precise questions, and the one she circled, Patience outperforms pride. Back in the present, a text buzzed against my palm. Marcus, quarterly report ready, up 12%. I locked the screen. The number didn't elate me. Numbers rarely do. What thrilled me, secretly and always, was the discipline inside them, the inching forward, the kept promise. Diana, Mom said, sing-song. How is work? Work. The way she said it, as if work were a hobby I might outgrow. We had a rough week, I answered softly. Lost a patient I thought we would keep. That's all I offered. There are rooms that do not deserve your sacred details. See? Mom said brightly to her circle of acquaintances. It's important, of course, but it's not the same as building something. Try 150, Dr. Martinez said, voice calm as a scalpel. Chief nursing officer pays 150, not 70. Rachel gave a tinkling laugh. Not exactly executive level though, is it? I watched Mr. Chen write something in his phone. Not a yes, not a no, a calculation. Jennifer leaned in. Do you want me to make a scene? Because I can make a scene. I smiled, shook my head. Not yet. Servers emerged with salads dotted in jewel tones. Silver cutlery chimed. The room smelled faintly of lemon and rosemary. Rachel drifted table to table, narrating her feed as if we were all in it. We're in scale mode, she told a couple in navy suits. Tight operations, ruthless efficiency. Her eyes pinballed between faces, cameras, opportunities. I turned toward the small cluster of nurses by the bar. One showed me a photo of her toddler smearing blue frosting on a nose. Another whispered that she finally paid off a student loan. We spoke quietly about ordinary triumphs, the ones that never trend, the ones that build a life. I felt grounded, oxygenated, almost safe. And then Rachel arrived at my side. Hey, she said breezily. Can I grab your laptop? My laptop? Just for a second. There's a file I need from my cloud, and I left mine in the car. She nudged my elbow, friendly sister aggressive. It'll take 2 minutes. Mr. Chen wants to see a forecast, and I already teased it in my deck. Mom materialized, bodyguard fast. I'll get it from coat check. She was already halfway to the door. I kept my face open, pleasant. Inside, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. That buzzing text, the subject lines, the careful compartments of a life. I'm not naive. I keep my accounts locked down, my files walled. Still, the speed of it, the casual entitlement of assuming my tools are communal, made something ancient press against my ribs. Diana? Rachel said, testing my pause. It's for business. Which business? Jennifer asked, sugar on the blade. Rachel didn't bother looking at her. The one that pays. Mom returned with my laptop, triumphant. Here you go, darling. Family shares. She pressed it into Rachel's arms like a christening gift. I could have said no. It was my right. But I felt Grandma's hand on my shoulder in the way old grief touches you, weightless and unmistakable. Patience. Let the colors show. Sure, I said, and my voice surprised me with its ease. 2 minutes. I even smiled, like a seal on a handshake. Rachel flipped it open. Reflex made me glance at the screen, ordinary desktop, nothing dramatic. She plugged the HDMI into the hotel's system, the big display waking with a soft, anticipatory glow. A hush moved through the room, that subtle animal quiet before something steps out of the trees. Password? Rachel asked, eyes already on the shared drive icon. I keyed it in, my fingers steady. Then I stood back, 3 feet of polished floor between us, the space where choices can be seen. She navigated fast, efficient, cloud, presentation, downloads. The cursor skated, then hovered, a hair too near the edge of my email client. A faint red dot pulsed on the dock, one new. Jennifer's knuckles brushed mine. Say the word. Not yet, I breathed. My pulse was a metronome, not a drum. Mom drifted closer to the screen as if the pixels might bless her. Mr. Chen angled his chair. Dr. Martinez's hand found the back of mine, a cool anchor. I remembered lines from a compliance presentation I'd given on data privacy, how easily, just a second becomes forever. On the big display, Rachel's deck opened, glossy and safe. She clicked, then frowned. Wrong version. Hang on. Her cursor swept toward the file icon, overshot, skimmed the dock, landed. The email client bloomed open like a flower under time-lapse. One subject line sat at the top, crisp as frost. Vanguard Monthly Portfolio Summary, 8,234,567. Rachel went very still, like a cat that's seen lightning. Around us, the room didn't yet understand. I did. The universe was opening its record book. She clicked. And the night inhaled. Rachel's show was far from over. After dazzling the guests with slides of upward trending graphs and smiling CEOs, she pivoted back to me like a hawk circling smaller prey. You know, Diana, she said brightly, being 35 with no husband, no kids, and no big assets is risky. You should think about stability. I could almost hear the collective intake of breath around the room. Friends from the hospital stiffened. Jennifer's eyes blazed. Mom patted Rachel's hand, encouraging the performance. What your sister means is that we worry. You've always been modest. She smoothed the linen tablecloth with theatrical care. You're stable, yes, but life is more than stability. You need ambition. You need Rachel's kind of spark. I smiled, faint but deliberate. Ambition comes in many shapes. Rachel tilted her head. Maybe. But to me, success is measured by scale. I'm offering you a chance to learn real scale. An unpaid internship could be the perfect start. Jennifer cut in, voice sharp enough to slice the candle flame between us. Diana has a master's degree. She runs an ICU unit that saves lives every week. That's not exactly entry level. Rachel dismissed her with a flick of a manicured nail. Nursing doesn't translate to business. I'm talking about real leadership. I felt the sting of her words, but only for a heartbeat. Years of ICU crises had trained me to let adrenaline wash through and leave clarity. And clarity told me this wasn't about my career. This was about control. Mom clasped her hands and addressed me as though the verdict were already sealed. Diana, this is a chance to finally learn from success. Family helping family. Be grateful. I looked at her, at both of them, and felt something inside me click into stillness. Grandma Grace's voice threaded through memory, low and calm. Patience. Let them speak until their own words become the evidence. Rachel leaned casually on my chair. Think about it. Work with me. Learn business. Maybe in a few years you'll earn a salary that means something. For now, you can help with data entry, maybe bookkeeping. A ripple of discomfort moved through the guests. Dr. Martinez's lips pressed into a thin, surgical line. Even Mr. Chen's neutral mask shifted. His eyes narrowed as if he were assessing risk, not opportunity. I forced a polite nod. I'll think about it. The words were soft, but they carried the weight of a closed door. Mom exhaled with satisfaction, mistaking composure for surrender. Good girl, she said. See, that's the spirit of family. Then Rachel's voice sharpened. But first, Diana, I need that file. Let me just pull it up. She pivoted back to my laptop, fingers a blur over the keyboard. I watched the cursor skate across icons, notes, documents, the email client pulsing with a single red notification. My chest tightened. 10 years of meticulous privacy balanced on one careless click. Jennifer's whisper brushed my ear. She's one tap away from everything. I know, I murmured. My pulse remained level, almost eerily calm. Rachel kept typing, half listening to Mom's chatter. We really should find you a more practical apartment. Renton's not glamorous, but sacrifices build futures. You mean your kind of future? I said evenly. Her smile sharpened. The successful kind. You've been managing. Managing isn't thriving. The words floated between us, thin and cold. I let them settle, unmoving. Around us, 50 guests fell into an uneasy silence. Even the clink of silverware faded. Then Rachel's nails skimmed the trackpad. A quick double tap. The email app bloomed on the giant display. The top subject line blazed like a flare. Vanguard Monthly Portfolio Summary. 8,234,567. For a second, no one understood except me. I saw the number the way a diver sees a shark's shadow. Inevitable, already too close. Rachel froze. Then, as if pulled by a magnet, she clicked. A white window opened, exposing the full header. The words, "Total portfolio balance, $8,234,567, shone with merciless clarity. Rachel's eyes widened, her breath catching like she'd swallowed a shard of glass. What is this?" Mom craned her neck. "What's what?" Rachel's voice cracked loud enough to echo off crystal and wood. "Diana has $8 million. The dining room gasped as one body, someone's fork clattered. The chandelier light seemed to flare, sharp as camera flashes. I stayed seated, hands folded, pulse steady. Years of night shifts had trained me for controlled emergencies. Only this time, I wasn't saving a patient. I was saving the truth. The dining room might as well have been struck by lightning. Conversations died mid-sentence. The clinking of glasses froze. All eyes drilled into me. $8 million? Mom's voice cracked in disbelief. Rachel spun my laptop toward the crowd so no one could doubt the number glowing on the email. "Look at this! Vanguard! $8,234,567. She's been hiding it." Guests gasped. Someone's phone camera clicked. I felt my spine settle, as if Grandma Grace's steady hand rested there. Mom's shock sharpened into anger. "Is this some kind of joke, Diana? Some prank?" "It's not a joke," I said quietly. Rachel's fingers flew, scrolling through dividend statements and transaction histories. "These records go back 10 years. You've been sitting on millions while we thought you were barely scraping by." Her voice pitched higher, bordering on a scream. "How do you even have this kind of money? Nurses don't make this." "That's my business," I answered, calm as still water. "Your business?" Mom stepped closer, trembling. "We are your family. How could you hide this from us?" Dr. Martinez stepped protectively to my side. "Maybe because of exactly this reaction," she said evenly. "Stay out of this," Rachel snapped. "This is family business." 50 guests watched in a silence that felt heavier than sound. I could see Mr. Chen, the venture capitalist, holding his phone low, recording with a practiced investor's eye. "All these years," Mom said, her face tightening, "you let us believe you were struggling. You let Rachel offer you charity." "I never said I was struggling," I replied. "You assumed. There's a difference." Rachel's voice was now raw with fury. "You lied by omission. Family shares everything. We have a right to that money." A bitter laugh almost escaped me, but I swallowed it. "Since when? When Grandma was sick? Where was this family then?" Mom's lips whitened. "Don't you dare bring her into this." "Why not? She's the reason." I stopped myself, a lifetime of privacy pulling back at the last second. "The reason what?" Rachel demanded. I stood, letting the weight of the moment settle over the room. "The money is mine. Legally, ethically, completely mine." "Explain," Rachel shot back. "You can't just make millions appear out of thin air." "Someone left it to me," I said simply. Mom's eyes narrowed. Who would leave you millions and not tell us?" "Someone who had their reasons." "That's not an answer," Rachel almost shouted. "It's the only one you're getting right now." Rachel's laugh was sharp and mean. "You probably conned some dying patient, found a lonely old man to—" "Careful," I cut in, my voice turning to steel. "You're about to say something you can't take back." She faltered but rallied. "Then tell the truth." "There are legal documents," I said evenly, "with witnesses and very specific conditions." From the corner, a deep baritone spoke. "That depends entirely on the documentation." All heads turned toward a tall, gray-haired man I hadn't expected to speak, Harold Brennan, one of Seattle's most respected estate lawyers, who'd come as someone's guest. "Family members have no automatic claim if an inheritance specifically excludes them," he explained calmly. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Rachel gave a nervous laugh. "That's absurd. You can't lose an inheritance you never had." "You can lose the possibility of ever receiving anything," Brennan countered, "if the will is written with clear forfeiture clauses." Mom's color drained. "Diana, was it Mother?" The air thickened until even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Rachel shook her head violently. "No way. Grandma Grace lived in a tiny house. She drove a rusted Subaru. She had nothing. I met her stare. Appearances can be deceiving. Isn't that what you tell your own clients? Never judge a book by its cover. She was a retired teacher, Mom whispered. A retired teacher who invested every spare penny for 50 years, I said softly. Who lived simply so she could leave something meaningful. And who watched carefully to see which of us actually cared about her, and which of us cared only about what she might someday give. A stunned quiet rolled over the tables. Somewhere near the bar, a wine glass tipped and shattered, the single sharp sound punctuating everything Grandma had just spoken through me. Rachel's face flushed crimson. You've had this for 10 years and said nothing? You let us feel sorry for you. You chose to assume I needed pity, I said. I chose to live my life. Mom's voice trembled with a mother's wounded pride. How could you keep this from me? I'm your mother. The same way you kept your visits from her, I replied, my words quiet but merciless. How many times did you go to see her in hospice? Silence. Rachel's eyes darted away. The truth hung in the room like a storm about to break, and I knew this was only the beginning of what Grandma had planned. For a long beat, the only sound was the faint hum of the chandeliers. Then Mom found her voice, thin with panic. Diana. Was it Mother? Was it Grace? The room stilled as if the name itself carried a spell. Rachel's eyes widened. That's impossible. Grandma had nothing. She lived like a schoolteacher from another century. I met her gaze. Appearances can be deceiving. Isn't that what you tell your clients? Never judge a book by its cover. She barely left her house, Mom said, shaking her head. She drove a car that should have been scrapped. And invested every spare penny, I replied. Quietly, for 50 years, she turned small savings into something extraordinary. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could feel Mr. Chen's analytical stare. He was reading more than numbers, he was reading character. Rachel crossed her arms. Even if Grandma had a hidden fortune, why give it to you and not to her own daughter, or at least share it among us? Because she watched, I said simply. She saw who came when she needed someone, and who only came for celebrations. Mom's face blanched. That's not fair. We were busy. I held up a hand. I sat with her almost every night in hospice. 6 months. She counted every visit. I didn't know she was keeping a ledger in her heart, but she did. Rachel's cheeks flamed. You manipulated her, made her think we didn't care. I held her hand while she died, I said quietly. There's a difference. Before another accusation could ignite, Harold Brennan, the estate lawyer who had quietly observed everything, stepped closer. If I may, he said in an even voice, your grandmother's will could have included conditions behavioral clauses to protect her wishes. They are legal and, if properly drafted, ironclad. Rachel scoffed, though her voice wavered. Behavioral clauses? That sounds like some TV drama. Brennan nodded calmly. It is more common than you think. A benefactor can stipulate that any attempt to claim money or any act of coercion triggers forfeiture. I've seen such clauses stand up in court. A stunned hush settled over the room. Guests leaned in, phones tilted higher. I took a breath that felt like stepping across a bridge I'd been building for years. Grandma was precise. She knew greed can wear family's face, so she put everything in writing. There are witnesses, lawyers, and conditions. Rachel's laugh came out brittle. You expect us to believe you without proof? Right on cue, the maitre d' appeared at the doorway, a tall woman in a navy suit beside him. Her posture radiated authority. Diana, she said, offering a small professional smile. I'm Margaret Chen, senior partner at Chen Williams & Associates. I handle Grace Mitchell's estate. My mother blinked. You're the lawyer? Yes. Margaret's eyes scanned the room, landing on me. And I understand tonight fulfills the 10-year privacy clause of Grace Mitchell's will. I have the documents with me. She stepped forward, leather portfolio in hand, and placed it gently on the table like the final piece in a long game of chess. The room collectively exhaled and then inhaled again, sensing that everything they thought they knew was about to be rewritten. Margaret opened the folder. This is the last will and testament of Grace Elizabeth Mitchell, executed the 15th of January 2015, 3 months before her passing. Witnessed and notarized. Her tone was crisp but almost tender, as if she, too, respected the woman whose foresight had orchestrated this evening. She read aloud, I, Grace Elizabeth Mitchell, leave the entirety of my estate, valued at approximately $3 million at the time of this writing, to my granddaughter, Diana Marie Sullivan. My reasons are both private and plain. She kept faith with me when others did not. Rachel's jaw dropped. 3 million? But she has 8. Margaret looked up. Miss Sullivan invested wisely. The 3 million became 8 through her own efforts. Grace anticipated this growth and encouraged Diana's independence. Mom swayed on her feet. But surely some of it. Margaret turned a page. There is, however, a condition. Diana must keep this inheritance private for a period of 10 years. Furthermore, any family member who abandoned me during my final illness shall have no claim now or in the future. The words fell like stones into still water. You could hear each one sink. Margaret withdrew another sheet. I also hold hospice visitor records. She read without flinching. Diana Sullivan, 247 visits. Patricia Sullivan, 3 visits. Rachel Sullivan, 0. The silence was brutal. Even the servers froze mid-step. Rachel's voice broke first. That doesn't mean… Margaret raised a hand. Grace anticipated further disputes. She added a forfeiture clause. Any family member who demands or attempts to obtain any part of this inheritance immediately and permanently forfeits any possibility of future gifts or assistance from Diana. All around us, guests reached for their phones to capture every word. Grandma Grace had written tonight like a playwright. Harold Brennan spoke again, firm and neutral. I've seen clauses like this enforced in court. They are binding. Rachel's defiance cracked. You can't be serious. Margaret's gaze didn't waver. By publicly demanding a share, you have already triggered the clause. I felt the entire room lean forward, waiting for the next revelation, knowing this was only the midpoint of the story my grandmother began a decade ago. The air inside the Fairmont's private dining room seemed to crystallize. Even the soft clatter of plates from the hallway faded until only Margaret Chen's voice carried. Grace anticipated that, once the 10-year period ended, some family members might feel entitled to Diana's inheritance, Margaret said, her tone precise. Therefore, she included what we call a forfeiture clause. Any family member who demands or attempts to claim any portion of the estate is immediately and permanently barred from future gifts or financial assistance from Diana Sullivan. Rachel's face drained of color. That's absurd. You can't lose money you never had. You can lose future possibilities, Harold Brennan interjected smoothly. Courts uphold this all the time. The intent of the benefactor is decisive. A murmur spread through the guests like wind through glass. Phones tilted higher, screens glowed. Margaret continued, unflinching. By publicly demanding 25% of Diana's assets, Rachel Sullivan, you have triggered this clause, and Patricia Sullivan, by demanding 50%, so have you. Mom stumbled back a step as though struck. We didn't know. Ignorance does not void the condition, Margaret replied. Her calm was almost merciful. She reached into the portfolio and produced 2 sealed envelopes. Grace left these letters for you meant to be opened only if you tried to claim Diana's inheritance. Hands trembling, Mom snatched hers and tore it open. As she read, tears slid down her cheeks. Rachel ripped hers more violently. The crisp paper crumpled in her fists. She knew, Rachel whispered. She knew we'd do this. Yes, I said quietly. Grandma knew exactly who you were. She saw the choices you made. Mom's voice cracked. But we're family. So was she, I answered. And you remembered that only when you thought there might be money. A heavy silence fell. Then a firm, businesslike baritone cut through it. Mr. Chen, the venture capitalist, stepped forward. Miss Sullivan, he addressed Rachel formally. I think we need to discuss our pending contract. Rachel straightened, clinging to professional instinct. Mr. Chen, this has nothing to do with… It has everything to do with it, he said. Character is part of every deal. Without another word, he left, phone already to his ear. The effect was instant and electric. Guests exchanged sharp glances. Several began texting. I saw the subtle choreography of opportunity closing like doors along a corridor. Margaret wasn't finished. She drew out a final page and began typing on a tablet. For the legal record, she said clearly, on September 20th, 2025, at approximately 8:47 p.m. Patricia Sullivan and Rachel Sullivan publicly demanded a share of Diana Sullivan's lawful inheritance. Per the forfeiture clause in Grace Mitchell's will, they are now permanently barred from receiving any financial gifts, loans, or assistance from Diana Sullivan. Rachel's voice leapt an octave. You can't just cut us off for one emotional outburst. It isn't Diana cutting you off, Margaret said evenly. It's you cutting yourselves off. Grace anticipated this exact scenario. Harold Brennan added his own quiet weight. I will gladly serve as an independent legal witness. The more documentation, the stronger the protection. Phones clicked like cicadas in summer. Some guests were openly live streaming. The internet, I knew, would not be kind. Then the collapse began in real time. Rachel's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and went pale. My biggest client, she whispered. We all heard her side of the conversation. What do you mean you're pulling out? We have a verbal yes, but no, that video is out of context. Her eyes swept the room, catching at least a dozen phones aimed at her. Stop recording. She shrieked, but even she knew it was useless. Another call came, then another, each one an unraveling contract. Her empire of million-dollar pitches was disintegrating minute by minute, the echo of Grandma Grace's plan moving faster than any market crash. This is your fault! Rachel turned on me, wild-eyed. You planned this. I planned to have a birthday dinner, I said, voice steady. You're the one who demanded to see my laptop. You're the one who announced my finances to 50 people. You're the one who tried to claim what wasn't yours. Margaret raised her tablet like a gavel. The documentation is complete. Diana, you are now free to use your inheritance as you choose, with no obligation to anyone in this room. Harold Brennan looked directly at Mom and Rachel. And if either of you attempts to contest the will or pressure Diana for money, you could face legal consequences. Extortion is a crime. Mom slumped into a chair, her letter from Grandma limp in her hand. Mother really did this, she whispered. She chose you over her own daughter. She chose the one who chose her, I said softly. When she was lonely, when she was in pain, when she needed someone to speak to doctors, where were you? No one answered. The silence that followed wasn't just absence of sound. It was the slow, grinding birth of truth. And it wasn't done yet. The night still had one more turn, the kind only Grandma Grace could have scripted. When the last guest finally left the Fairmont, the dining room looked like a theater. After curtain call, chairs skewed, candles spent, the air still charged with invisible applause and judgment. I stood a long moment in the hush, letting my grandmother's foresight settle into me. She had planned every turn of this evening. But the story didn't end when the doors closed. By the next morning, her plan began to ripple outward. Rachel's phone calls multiplied overnight, but they were all the wrong kind. Her biggest client, Cascade Ventures, texted a terse contract review required urgent. By noon, 3 major contracts had dissolved. Investors who had once chased her presentations now left messages heavy with regret to inform you. Screenshots of our confrontation spread like wildfire. Entitled, Sister, Demands, Inheritance and Loses. Everything headlined TikTok, LinkedIn, and local news blogs. Hashtags like number instant karma and number grandma knew trended for hours. By evening, Sullivan Marketing Solutions had lost 40% of its projected revenue. Mom faced her own unraveling. Country club friends suddenly had overlapping travel plans. Her book club recommended a pause to regroup. The charity board she loved asked her to take a break for reflection. Status. The currency she'd spent decades accumulating evaporated in a single weekend. And yet, inside me, something softened. I thought of Grandma Grace again. Money is a mirror, Diana. It shows people to themselves. She had never wanted punishment, only clarity. 3 days later, I was called into Dr. Patricia Hoffman's office at the hospital. My stomach knotted. Viral fame rarely bodes well in medicine. But Dr. Hoffman smiled and handed me her phone. 3 million views, she said. And I was there, remember? The grace and precision you showed, most people can't lead an ICU, let alone a public family crisis. My heart steadied. The board unanimously voted, she continued. You're promoted to Chief Nursing Officer, effective immediately. Relief and gratitude swelled through me like oxygen. Thank you, I said, my voice catching. There's more, Dr. Hoffman added. We'd like to create the Grace Mitchell Nursing Scholarship Fund, with the hospital matching your initial contribution up to $500,000. For a moment I saw Grandma at her kitchen table, sliding another dollar into a coffee tin marked, "Someday," smiling that quiet, knowing smile. She would have loved this, I whispered. But the evening's reach went further still. Emails poured in from nurses across the country. We saw your story. We're fighting similar battles. Could you guide us? From those messages grew Nurses Building Wealth, a support and financial literacy network that quickly expanded to thousands of members. We met online and in person, swapping strategies for investing, setting boundaries, and valuing our labor. What began as a painful family reckoning became a nationwide movement for empowerment. Not all aftershocks were loud. One afternoon, Dad arrived at my apartment alone, a simple paper bag of coffee beans in his hands. I should have protected you, he said, eyes damp. I let them treat you badly because it was easier than standing up. Your grandmother saw that weakness in me. I don't want it anymore. I reached for his hand, feeling the quiet courage that had taken him years to find. In that moment, a new kind of family began. Rachel, meanwhile, watched her carefully built empire crumble day by day. Employees resigned, investors vanished. She tried frantic rebrands and soft apologies on social media, but each new clip of her demanding my inheritance found a larger audience. The internet has a long memory and a sharp taste for hypocrisy. I didn't rejoice. I simply observed. Grandma had promised that truth keeps perfect records, and now I watched those records surface everywhere, from business journals analyzing hubris risk to church groups discussing boundaries. By the time the week ended, the storm had redrawn every map in my life. My career, my finances, my family. What remained was cleaner, truer, and unmistakably mine. 6 months after that unforgettable night, life had settled into a new and strangely peaceful rhythm. But peace didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. I knew that if my family and I were ever to meet without repeating old wounds, there had to be clear, written boundaries, rules as visible as the hospital protocols I enforce every day. I called them the Sullivan Family Protocols. Measured contact. My mother and sister could email me once a month. Phone calls were reserved strictly for emergencies. Money-free zone. Any mention of loans, investments, or financial help would end the conversation and suspend contact for 3 months. Neutral ground. All holiday gatherings had to be in public places with multiple exits and quiet witnesses. I even hired a discreet security service trained in family harmony management, their gentle presence enough to keep tempers in check. Writing those protocols felt both clinical and holy, like triage for the heart. Grandma Grace would have approved, kindness with a backbone. The first real test came at Thanksgiving. I chose a bright bistro near the waterfront, no one's territory, no hidden corners. When I arrived, Dad was already there, holding a table and 2 mugs of hot cider. He squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens," he said, "I've got you." Mom and Rachel entered together. Time had changed them in small, undeniable ways. Mom's hair was streaked with new silver, the confident lift of her chin had softened. Rachel wore a simple sweater and no designer bag. Her eyes flicked around the room as though rehearsing humility. "Thank you for meeting us," Mom said, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "It's Thanksgiving," I replied. "Family with boundaries is still family." For a while we talked like cautious travelers, sticking to safe landscapes, weather, books, a neighbor's new puppy. Then Rachel exhaled, almost a sigh. "I want to say something." She clasped her hands, looked at me squarely. "My company is gone. Everything I built collapsed because of that night. But the truth is, it collapsed because of who I was. I'm working at a nonprofit now, helping small businesses for free. I'm trying to build something honest." I studied her face, the faint tiredness at the eyes, the sincerity unvarnished by performance. "Grandma would like that," I said. Service over profit was her favorite equation. Mom's turn came slower. She toyed with her napkin before speaking. "I'm in therapy," she said at last. "I'm trying to understand why status meant more to me than people. Your grandmother's letter. I've read it again and again. I see now what I lost." Dad reached over and covered her hand with his. We both made mistakes, he said softly. But we can do better. We ate in a gentle quiet after that, the clatter of nearby diners like a warm shield. No one mentioned money. No one demanded forgiveness on command. And for once, silence wasn't avoidance, it was respect. As we rose to leave, Rachel hesitated. "The scholarship fund you started in Grandma's name," she said, eyes bright. "I donated what I could. $50. It isn't much." "It's not about the amount," I interrupted gently. "It's about the heart behind it. Grandma would have loved that." For the first time in years, my sister gave me a genuine, unguarded smile. Later that evening, Dad walked me to my car. "I should have stood up for you long ago," he said quietly. "But I'm standing now. I'm proud of you, Diana." I hugged him, feeling the solid truth of his words. In that moment, I sensed a slow healing in our family. Not perfect, but real. Back home, I lit a single candle on the balcony and watched the moon glide over Seattle's skyline. The city shimmered like a promise kept. Grandma's voice seemed to drift on the night air. "Patience and courage, my dear. They'll take you further than wealth ever could." Her plan had never been about the money. It had been about this boundaries strong enough to hold love without letting it rot. A year has passed since that birthday party that changed everything. Seattle has moved through 4 seasons of rain and light, and still Grandma Grace's presence feels close like a quiet current under every step I take. Last week I visited her grave on Queen Anne Hill. The sky was a soft watercolor gray, and yellow roses, the kind she loved, were blooming in my hands. I brushed pine needles from the headstone and whispered, "You knew, didn't you? You knew exactly how this would play out." A breeze slipped through the cedars, and for an instant I could almost hear her voice. "Money is just a tool, Diana. What matters is who holds it and what they do with it." She was right. She always was. In the 12 months since that explosive dinner, her gift has multiplied literally and spiritually. The original $8 million I inherited has grown to 12 through careful investing and patient strategy. But the true dividends are harder to measure. The Grace Mitchell Nursing Scholarship, which now supports dozens of nurses every year, the Nurses Building Wealth Network, which has expanded beyond 10,000 members and given countless caregivers the courage to protect their finances and their peace. Rachel is still rebuilding. She works quietly at a nonprofit that offers free marketing guidance to small businesses. Every few weeks she volunteers at the same hospice where Grandma spent her last days, reading to patients who have no visitors. I think of it as her way of saying sorry in the only language Grandma might have trusted: service. Mom is changing too. Therapy has become a weekly ritual. She tells Dad she finally understands why her own mother wrote those hard words. "I chased appearances," she admitted once over coffee, "and I nearly lost everything that mattered." Dad, true to his renewed strength, simply replied, "But you didn't lose the chance to change." As for me, I remain an ICU nurse. People sometimes ask why I don't retire and live off investments. My answer is simple: because I love what I do. Every shift is a chance to stand with someone in their most vulnerable hour, something no market gain can replace. Grandma saw that calling in me long before I could name it. I keep the Sullivan family protocols intact. They aren't walls. They're a well-built house where relationships can grow without rotting. We meet on holidays in neutral spaces. We talk about books, gardens, and new patients who touched my heart. Money never comes up, and if it ever does, the conversation ends gracefully, as agreed. Sometimes, strangers still recognize me from the viral video. A few whisper, "You gave me the courage to set boundaries with my own family." Each time I smile, and silently thank Grandma Grace for her brilliance and love. As I laid the last rose on her grave, I felt no anger, no triumph, just a steady gratitude. She didn't leave me wealth to make me rich. She left it to show me, and the world, that real inheritance is wisdom. The wisdom to choose people who bring peace, the courage to remove those who don't, and the patience to let the truth reveal itself. I walked back through the quiet cemetery as dusk deepened, a light drizzle softening every sound. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with a gentle reminder. Tonight was another meeting of nurses building wealth. Another circle of lives ready to change. Grandma's plan was never only about money. It was about freedom, the freedom to live, to give, and to love on your own terms. And that freedom, I know now, is worth more than any fortune.